the main thing that they're talking about in this symbolism in the visual arts is that humans unconsciously make things symbolic. Okay, we make symbols of everything. And actually, that's every word. Okay, because if I say any word to you, say the word yacht. Okay, yacht is one of 12 words in the Dutch language that appears in English. Okay, but it has a very specific meaning in Dutch. It means small boat. But to you in English, what does it mean to you? How do you think of
Yacht,
a yacht? What comes into your mind when I say the word yacht?
Donald Trump's boat.
Okay. All right. So you
the gold enameled large luxury.
yeah. Okay, you
Boat,
think
boat.
of that.
Yes.
Okay, but we have a yacht club over here that has nothing like that. I mean, it even has pretty big boats. I mean, there's some 60, 70 footers tied up over there, but they're nothing like Donald Trump's or any Saudi prince's yacht or anything like that. And uh, you know, the Eastport, or what is it called? The Severn Sailing Association specializes in solings. Okay, well, soling used to be the three-man Olympic class racing boat, no power to it. It was just strictly a racing machine. And I actually had one for 5 years long ago. And I actually came to a regatta here in Annapolis one time at the Severn Sailing Association. That's a yacht. What happens is in each of our minds, with every word in the language, we basically make it symbolic of an image that we have in our minds. So as we're talking to one another, we're actually seeing images in our psyche, and that's how we interact. I will say something to you, and then that makes you think of something. It links to you. That's called anchoring, and in psychology, that's called neurolinguistic programming, where you hear a word and it makes you think of another word, or it makes you think of an image of something. And so those are symbols. And so every word is a symbol in a sense. And so interestingly, this new movie, Arrival, I wanted to mention that. It is an awesome movie. I started to see the reviews of it before I went to see it, and it was getting like 93, 94% positive reviews. And I'm saying, wow, this is a movie about aliens. Why is this so popular, you know? And it's really popular because it's an incredibly cool movie, and it has an incredibly cool twist in the end of it. The aliens arrive, and they too have symbols. And so this movie is hugely Jungian, hugely Jungian, right? And so first of all, they have 1,500 foot high, sort of torpedo-shaped ships that come in and they stand on end, right? And they hover. They don't actually come down to the ground. They have anti-gravity or something, so they can stay like 20 feet off the ground, and they just hover. And so, you know, what you would expect from all previous alien movies is that the U.S. government would come in and try to blow them out of the sky and so on. And there's certainly that urge, okay? And so you get the whole range of human emotions and human interactions with them. And 12 of them come. It's not one ship, it's 12. So they just sit there. And so the U.S. government says, well, maybe we should be curious about this. So it happens that it's in Montana. So the Army sets up a little cantonment base around this thing, right? And they're trying to figure out how to interact with it. And so every 18 hours, a hatch at the bottom of the ship opens. And so after a while, they got the idea that they should go up into the ship. And a lot of this is assumed because the way this is happening is that there's a linguist that's dragooned into coming with the team, and this is Amy Adams, okay, and so she's coming in like a month later or something, and so you're just assuming all these things that have happened. And in a couple of cases, the other main character is Forrest Whitaker, is telling her what they're doing now. Okay, they've already figured out how to interact with these creatures, and so what happens is they go up into the ship, and then they get at a certain level, and then gravity means nothing anymore, and then they can just walk up the sides of this passageway until they get to a certain level where there's a glass, and it's kind of like a big fish tank, a huge fish tank, and the aliens are in an environment that they can't interact with our environment. They have these tentacles, and they spew smoke out of their tentacles, and then it forms a shape, and it's the shape of the Uroboros. Okay, Jungian Uroboros, right? You know what that is?
No.
Okay. All right. Well,
I know the mandalas.
well, it's the snake that's eating its tail.
Okay.
Right? Okay, so in Jungian psychology, the snake that's eating its tail is a symbol of the boundaries of chaos in the universe. Okay, and
You mean chaos is outside of the ring?
chaos is outside of the ring, and within the ring of the universe itself, it's just a cyclic existence. So it's eating its tail, right? That's what it means, cyclic existence. So, in Buddhism, they're talking about rebirth and so on, and that's cyclic existence too. So outside of the Uroboros, the snake eating its tail, there's chaos. We don't know what's out there, right? But inside, there's a universe that we can figure out by physics and cosmology and whatever it is, mathematics. So these creatures spew this smoke out of their tentacles, and boom, it forms into a Uroboros looking symbol. And except there are hundreds of them, and it's their written language that they're showing. So over time they develop a lexicon of these things, and they're each one's a little different. It has little tentacles hanging out of it and so on, but it's nothing like any of your Earth language, right? And so it's just fascinating to see Amy Adams then figure out what it is that they're trying to say, right? And
What do they say? Take me to your leader?
well, actually, they're okay. This isn't really giving away the secret, but what it comes to, what they're saying is, first of all, we are only 1/12 of the message. Okay, so this ship here in Montana is only 1/12 of the message, but we are here to teach you our language, because 3,000 years from now, we need humanity to save us, quote unquote. Okay, and so they know this, right? So in the end, this is their message, basically, that we're here to teach you our language, and 3,000 years from now, we need humanity to save us. So that's why we're doing this now, so that you'll be there for us when we need you. It's an interesting concept, right? And so they still don't feel like they're communicating at all. And then finally, Amy Adams just goes and puts her hand on the glass, and the tentacle suddenly comes up. It's sort of like a octopus tentacle or a squid tentacle, and then boom, this thing is on the other side, and she says, "Oh, that's a communication," or she says, "Oh, that's a proper hello." But there's a very, very interesting twist to this movie.
Which makes it Jungian.
Oh, it's hugely Jungian, and also it's a reference to Billy Pilgrim. Do you remember Billy Pilgrim from? Did you see Slaughterhouse-Five, the movie?
Yes.
You
Yeah,
saw
I
it.
remember that. What's the relation, Skip, of symbols as communication versus symbols as keys to the unconscious?
Well, I think all symbols are keys to the unconscious, but I think the way Jung explains it is there's some things that can't be said. Okay, you can't explain them in language, and you can't come up with the answer logically. The logical, let's take World War II as an example. Most people during World War II, if you're thinking of the battles between all the great armies, right? Most people couldn't see an end to that except continual fighting, crushing one another together. And it was only when Oppenheimer got the first atom bomb to happen. It was Einstein's equation, but Fermi and Oppenheimer really did the engineering work to make it happen. Einstein didn't work it out. I mean, I think he said that these things just came to him, right? And so he knew a lot of stuff, and then it came to him what the answer was, right? But it came to him because he had huge understanding of the way cosmology worked, and nobody had worked it out up until then. And so he understood space, time, and all these other things, and he understood how the sun works and what the sun is, and so on. And people didn't know that, and so he had to work out. Obviously, he had to work out what critical mass is, right? Once he worked out critical mass, he understood that there were only one or two elements on Earth that could be formulated or brought together into critical mass so that you could have...
Had to be very unstable
Well,
elements.
but very heavy. Okay, very heavy. Okay, because uranium, I think, is one of the heaviest elements.
Neutrons.
Right, and so you had to bring together. I think if you bring together in a tight ball refined uranium, which is what we're talking about.
And I think the stellar mechanics were worked out by Oppenheimer, if I recall.
Yeah, that may be. And so, I mean, basically, it was Einstein. All Einstein did in this whole process was he figured out E equals mc squared.
And there you go. That's
Right.
what you need.
But E equals mc squared itself is only a symbol for a very complex set of equations. Einstein did that, and then Einstein wrote a letter to Roosevelt. It sat around before anybody read it for weeks.
Where was Einstein living at that time?
Princeton. He was in Princeton. Showed it to other scientists, and they said, "Whoa, yeah, he's right." And then they got going on the Manhattan Project after that because they realized what it would mean. But those were answers that just came out of the unconscious of these scientists. Malcolm Gladwell wrote this book. Basically, he says, you have to spend 10,000 hours doing something, and then you have enough knowledge about that something, whatever it is, to all of a sudden get a sudden insight that's the next step, right? And that's what Gates had done. You know, Gates was a nerd, and so from like when he was 15 years old, he was going over to the University of Washington working on their mainframes at odd hours when the students didn't want to work there, and so he just learned computers inside out. You know, one thing leads to another, and these intuitions. You're at a certain spot and some intuition comes up and you go ahead and do it, and it's your psyche, your unconscious, that's telling you.
Everyone's works completely differently, doesn't
That,
it?
well, yeah, well, I think the psyche more or less works the same. I mean, it's the psyche in one sense, and that sense is that it's always trying to tell you something you don't know. Okay, and it's telling you based on the inputs it's had over your lifetime. So you're born with more or less tabula rasa in your psyche, and so you start.
Except for the archetypes.
Except, well, the archetypes are the instincts, right? Archetypes are just a shorthand for talking about instincts, right?
Well, some archetypes, from what I've read by modern psychologists, are actually as a result of aberrations in early childhood.
But they still come out of your instincts.
Yes.
Okay.
And these relations that we have on this graph,
Right,
this chart,
right. That sort of thing.
the transference.
Right, and transference and all those things. Okay, so everybody's, every human being is born more or less with the same equipment
Right.
and dealing with people and what the rules are and who you can talk to and how you can talk to them and all those things you learn growing up based on your environment. Okay, so the wife from Namibia is going to be somewhat different from a wife brought up in Dubuque, right? But nonetheless, her body is going to function the same way. And the interesting thing is that the two psyches, based on the two different inputs over the lifetime, might bring up something remarkable, amazing. You just don't know. I see a lot of mixed race people who are half Asian and half Caucasian, for example, who are brilliant.